We're driven by the search for better. But when it comes to hiring, the best way to search for a candidate isn't to search at all. Don't search, match with Indeed. Indeed is your matching and hiring platform with over 350 million global monthly visitors, according to Indeed data, and a matching engine that helps you find quality candidates fast. Ditch the busy work. Use Indeed for scheduling, screening, and messaging so you can connect with candidates faster. Leveraging over 140 million qualifications and preferences every day, Indeed's matching engine is constantly learning from your preferences, so the more you use Indeed, the better it gets. Join more than 3.5 million businesses worldwide that use Indeed to hire great talent fast. And listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/Blue Wire. Just go to Indeed.com/Blue Wire right now and support our show by saying that you heard about Indeed on this podcast. That's Indeed.com/Blue Wire. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? You need Indeed.
To have a team that is, by all accounts, a juggernaut on offense and defense completely miss the playoffs because the special teams was that bad. Like, not even like bad enough that they had to be a wild card team, bad enough they didn't get a first round bye or anything, but bad enough that they missed the tournament entirely. It's something that I don't think we'll ever see replicated in the NFL again. And, you know, in a lot of ways, that's the epitome of 2000s, 2010s Chargers football.
It's October 2010, Patriots at Chargers. This is Remember That Game, the podcast about sporting events that take you on a journey and maybe chart the path of the zeitgeist. I'm your host, Thomas Emerick, and my guest is Alex Katson, whose work you can find at USA Today Chargers Wire. A renowned spreadsheetsman, he's also got himself a following at patreon.com/Alex Katson. The San Diego Chargers are row above the rest in yards gained and allowed in 2010. Teams of the 2000s and 2010s perfected the art of chargering away games and seasons of statistical dominance. Alex, do you feel like this Week 7 game here against New England, with that we've chosen a pretty good vehicle for this?
Definitely. Yeah, this is a perfect encapsulation of what the 2010 Chargers and 2010s Chargers were.
Much like with the Egyptians building the pyramids all those years ago, there's still no consensus as to how the 2010 Chargers missed the postseason. Outside, they're the Chargers. Through 6 games, they continually just about doubled their opponents in total yards, kept finding a way to lose. 2-4 heading into this one. Crucial Week 7 game here on the CBS main stage with Jim Nantz and Phil Simms for the 4 Eastern, 1 Pacific slot. Back then, I imagine whether or not you had the ticket, you could probably catch this one.
Yep. If it wasn't a national TV game, it was at least on local TV for me because I was still in San Diego at the time. So definitely watched this one all the way through. And, you know, it's one of those 2010s Chargers games where you watch it all the way through and you're like, man, I really wish I had done maybe something else. But here we are, and it's another Chargers Sunday. And, you know, Tom Brady is here.
Run everyone up to speed on how, despite the number 1 total defense at the time of this game and the league's leading passer in Phillip Rivers, they came in at 2-4. Which occurrence from each game you, Alex, feel was the craziest Chargers bullshit? We start Week 1 at Kansas City, Matt Castle, Chiefs. Defense really only gave up 7 points, but which one was crazier Chargers bullshit? The giving up a turn touchdown to Dexter McCluster and a fumble return was stripped. Ryan Matthews took it back inside the 10. So between those two, the Chiefs get to 21 points. Or somehow not connecting with Malcom Floyd wide open 2 straight plays at the end of the game.
I can give Ryan Matthews a little bit of leeway, right? It's his first game of his NFL career. It's raining. He's someone that came into the NFL with some fumble issues already. And so, you know, you fumble it on, you know, week 1 of your first NFL season. It's not ideal, but, you know, give him a little credit. McCluster is one of the best returners in the league to that point. Maybe kick it away from him in that situation, especially if you're only going to have Cyphers and I think it's Randy McMichael back there and have the other 9 guys kind of pressing up on him. But really miss Floyd on those 2 straight plays. The one play, it just sails over his head. Rivers is throwing it on the move. And then the second one, Floyd just kind of gets his foot stuck in the turf and can't find the ball. That's uncharacteristic for this team, especially for Floyd, who at this point is, a pretty well established member of this offense and has a pretty good rapport with Rivers. That definitely hurts more.
Especially painful with Vincent Jackson out with the contract dispute. The Chargers do bounce back the next week, 1-1 going into week 3. And what is the crazier Chargers bullshit? Leon Washington running back not one but 2 kickoff returns for touchdown, or a delay of game, 4th and 10 with it all on the line late.
Again, the special teams weakness is going to be a key theme of this episode. And again, Washington is one of the better returners in the league to this point. That first return that he has, okay, fine. You can say, it's a bad special teams unit. Washington's a good returner. That's great. The second one is a little bit more inexcusable, especially in that situation. But a delay a game on a 4th and 10 is the type of situational awareness that, as we kind of get into the Patriots game, we'll see that this Chargers team just sort of lacks. And so even beyond, having the number one offense and the number one defense, it kind of sets the stage nicely for this is an unserious football team. No matter what the stats say.
The piling up yards, not giving up a ton of yards. And Phillip Rivers, back-to-back years as top-graded Pro Football Focus quarterback in 2009 and 2010. We'll see in this game as we get to it. They have a knack for getting pre-snap penalties when the entire game is on the line. They demolish teams when they win. When they lose, it's just wild. They go into week 5, 2-2 at the Raiders. They've beaten them 13 straight games, but conspire to lose. And which is the crazier thing to you? Punt block on back-to-back drives, only time it's happened in the Super Bowl era, or the Rivers fumble on the game-winning drive. Not as much the fumble itself, but Randy McMichael's recovery attempt. It looked like he couldn't decide what he wanted to do there with it. What was more Charger?
Yeah, I mean, anytime that you are the only team to ever have something happen to you in the Super Bowl era, I think that's the most emblematic of the Chargers franchise in general. 2 punt blocks, especially for, what for the most part through the late 2010s has been a pretty decent punt unit with Mike Cyphers back there. It's an Australian punter. There's a little bit more sort of a latency time to get the kickoff and everything, but it's not anything that's been a problem to this point. And so to give up 2 straight punt blocks that leads to 9 points, it's a safety and a touchdown on back-to-back possessions. That's insane. And so that's definitely the crazier one, but also Randy McMichael not falling on that ball. Like, he's the only player within 2 yards of it when he tries to pick it up and advance it. And, if he just falls on it and the Chargers recollect, like, they're the number one offense in football. They will be in a position to still be able to convert that drive, even if they're behind the sticks a little bit. And so, still a crazy play, but probably not crazier than, having something that has never happened in history and has never happened since then happen to them earlier in that game.
They have a knack for somehow combining it all into one game. The never before seen folly, but still a more normal but extremely painful end of the game result. Just on the cusp of winning, that a field goal wins. They're in Raiders territory, and so they lose to the Raiders first time in 13 games. They can still get back to 500 again. Week 6 at the Rams. Antoine Barnes gets a roughing on 3rd and goal from the 13. Sam Bradford throwing short of the conversion. It would have been a field goal attempt, but instead, roughing the passer, you make it 17-0 instead of 13-0. Or Kading slips on the turf to miss a field goal that would have made it a 1-score deficit late in the game. What was more Charger?
I think the Kading one is more Chargers here. This is a guy who was the first team All-Pro kicker in 2009. Like, he's coming off the first team All-Pro season. And it's turf. You're not really the whole point of turf is that it's supposed to be grippier. It's supposed to be pretty difficult to slip on a surface like that.
Yeah. Almost too grippy.
Yeah, exactly. And so that one definitely, hurts a little bit more. At least the Barnes play is like relatively normal in terms of bad things that can happen to you on a football field. Bradford is looking short and he hits Amendola, and Amendola is, 2-3 yards short of the goal line on that play. But the difference between a 13-0 and a 17-0 deficit at this point to this Chargers team is essentially nothing. And so,
Yeah.
Kading slipping on, a surface that, like you said, is almost too grippy at times, is really the more unfathomable sort of Charger situation there.
We're going to have some more unfathomable ones here in week 7 as the Chargers roll in 2-4. Gotta have it. Patriots come in as 1.5 point slight dogs there at 4-1. So the market is betting on positive regression for the Bolts to some degree. Chargers stifled Tom Brady early, and first quarter, they got the ball up 3-0. San Diego, winners of 4 straight division titles. Did it feel like the Chargers could start slow, yet again, still hold that AFC West belt?
Definitely. I mean, this is how they operated for most of the late 2000s. They'd start slow. You even hear Jim Nantz and Phil Simms say it in the commentary during this game, that they really just aren't awake in September. They're in October, November, especially December. Philip Rivers always takes a huge step forward in December football team. And so, 2-4 isn't great. You have to play the Tom Brady Patriots. That's always going to be a difficult game. But there's still, I think, a lingering sort of sense of they are going to figure it out. Marcus McNeil doesn't come back from a contract dispute until the week 6 game against the Rams. They gave up 7 sacks in that game of Rivers, which is his career high. And so you're expecting some positive regression for the offensive line. The Vincent Jackson contract dispute is still ongoing. You're expecting him back at some point. You go into this game missing Floyd and Legedu Naanee with injury. Gates has missed some time with injuries. Ryan Matthews has missed a week or two with injuries. And so there's definitely a feeling of like, if they can have all of the players on the field at once and give them a couple weeks to gel, then this is certainly a team that is still potent, obviously, and should have the ability to still win that AFC West division, especially in what is, at this point, back in 2010, not an especially strong division. And so there's definitely still optimism, but it definitely feels like this is a game where you need to show that it's starting to turn around here in week 7.
Through 3 weeks, I sent the graphic before the show. They show the standings, AFC West standings. Kansas City 3-0, just dumb. This is a team that would go on. Well, not going to spoil, but their season would end by just getting absolutely crushed by Baltimore. But by week 7, Chiefs were on a 1-2 stretch, so still just a couple games back going in for the Chargers. And Phil Simms and Jim Nantz were kind of referencing these are the belt holders. And welcome viewers who just watched Titans Eagles. We're here in San Diego. Tennessee 27 unanswered in the fourth quarter to rally back. Kerry Collins to Kenny Britt was nigh unstoppable. We're midway through the first quarter here, and Chargers backup tight end Chris Wilson has just fumbled on a 3rd and long. They dumped off to him, had no chance of converting. That was interesting risk reward calculation. 3rd and 14, dump off to the tight end. Fumbled, Patriots ball on the goal line. Instead of Chargers with a chance to go up 2 scores, Patriots are in position to go up 7-3. Is the frustration setting in already?
Definitely. You're thinking not again already, especially against these Patriots, the Brady Patriots, who have knocked the Chargers out of the playoffs multiple times already in the late 2000s. This is a kind of like, that you need to play mistake-free football in order to keep this team at bay, especially with the way that the defense is playing to this point through like midway through the first quarter. And so you're already starting to kind of like put the hands over the eyes and, be a little bit afraid to look at this point. And it only gets stupider from here.
Patriots convert. Tom Brady, he also throws a tight end that hasn't caught that many passes. Rob Gronkowski's 9th career catch slips across on play action Antoine Barnes does a good job of reading the play action, getting back to bump Gronk. Turns out it's hard to move Gronk off his path. Touchdown Patriots. Now, Norv Turner was saying that the Chargers have a lot of players who aren't used to carrying the ball as a reason for why they're fumbling so much. We'll see that again. Richard Goodman playing by college rules, catching it 25 yards down the field the next drive and leaving the ball there like the play's over. And they're already without their top three this game. As you mentioned, Jackson, Floyd out with injury, Legedu Naanee out with injury. This is who Rivers is working with. How does this season and how Rivers played, despite how it'll go and the things the Chargers will conspire to do to lose, how does the season factor into the 04 QB class debate for you?
Yeah, I think that it's a pretty firm feather in the cap in Rivers' favor. He ends up leading the league in passing this season with over 4,700 yards. Makes his second straight Pro Bowl, third overall, and really for most of the season only has Antonio Gates, which is a big piece to have. Floyd comes back and plays a majority of the season. Jackson only ends up playing 5 games. And I believe this is the season where, he's thrown to something like 13 different receivers by week 7. And to me, obviously biased as a Chargers fan, someone that grew up watching Rivers and everything. But to me, like the supporting cast that Phillip worked with, especially this season and kind of like as Floyd and Jackson and even Gates start to age out a little bit, is so much worse than what the other 04 quarterbacks have. I mean, you see that in the success that those teams overall have too. The Steelers win a couple Super Bowls with Roethlisberger. Eli takes the Giants to a couple Super Bowls. And to me, Rivers just never has that same supporting cast outside of Gates. They have a couple of seasons before this where Floyd and Jackson are both healthy and both playing. But 2010 is really the season where they put all of this together. And this is the number one offense with Vincent Jackson only playing 5 games.
Yeah.
If they resolve that contract dispute before the season, he plays all 16, then, we're looking at potentially a 5,000 yard season for Rivers this year. And so to me, I think it's a pretty strong argument in favor of Rivers in terms of the 04 quarterback class debate.
Since I have a Chargers fan on, I have to ask, Santonio Holmes, corner of the end zone, the Super Bowl, would Patrick Creighton have made that play?
I don't think so.
How about Craig Buster Davis?
Yeah, Buster Davis, certainly not. Maybe practice squad call-up Sei Ujiri-Tutu, who will go on to have a pretty nice career with the Chargers for the next couple of years here. But this is his first game ever here in Week 7 against the Patriots. So maybe not yet.
Yeah, straight off the practice squad, Ujiri-Tutu makes the most of his 2 targets. But could he have made that Manningham catch down the sideline? Could you see Ujiri-Tutu snagging that one?
I don't see him getting that one. I think that if he had that in him, I think that he probably wouldn't have needed to have been Ryan Matthews' roommate in order to get an NFL shot.
Yeah. Well, speaking of Ryan Matthews, could he have done what Willie Parker did to the Seahawks?
Goodness, no. I don't think that Ryan Matthews could have done that to a MAC team.
Doesn't get a ton of room to run, but also does a lot not help himself in a lot of ways. Drew Brees, the guy y'all traded to, or y'all let walk to New Orleans, great career, but was the organization ever not getting a deal with Teron Armstead by the time the season started?
No, well, I mean, they did just do that to Marcus McNeil in this exact season. So, no.
So, interesting. A lot of stuff Rivers had to deal with here in 2010. And for those who are just joining us from overtime in Baltimore, we welcome you to Qualcomm, where Jacob Hester has just dropped.
We're driven by the search for better. But when it comes to hiring, the best way to search for a candidate isn't to search at all. Don't search, match with Indeed. Indeed is your matching and hiring platform with over 350 million global monthly visitors, according to Indeed data, and a matching engine that helps you find quality candidates fast. Ditch the busy work. Use Indeed for scheduling, screening, and messaging so you can connect with candidates faster. Leveraging over 140 million qualifications and preferences every day, Indeed's matching engine is constantly learning from your preferences, so the more you use Indeed, the better it gets. Join more than 3.5 million businesses worldwide that use Indeed to hire great talent fast. And listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/Blue Wire. Just go to Indeed.com/Blue Wire right now and support our show by saying that you heard about Indeed on this podcast. That's Indeed.com/Blue Wire. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? You need Indeed.
When you need mealtime inspiration, it's worth shopping Baker's, where you'll find over 30,000 mouth-watering choices that excite your inner foodie. And no matter what tasty choice you make, you'll enjoy our everyday low prices, plus extra ways to save, like digital coupons worth over $600 each week. You can also save up to $1 off per gallon at the pump with fuel points. More savings and more inspiring flavors make shopping Baker's worth it every time. Baker's, fresh for everyone. Fuel restrictions apply.
What he thought was a pass, he just walked away. I'm assuming he thought it was a pass. It was, in fact, a fumble returned by Rob Ninkovich to within the Chargers' 10-yard line. The Chargers hold again, actually hold New England to 0 for 6 on third down the first half. 13-3 at the half, not horrible, all things considered, but this team keeps doing sort of astonishing things like that with the score not being good at the end of it. How much do you buy theories that paint? I've seen it sort of minimized how extraordinary this was, first in offense and defense at the end of the season. Paint it as less extraordinary because of all the special teams, defensive TDs, and shortened fields and game script.
Yeah, I mean, I think offensively, like it's difficult to minimize again what they get done with what they have out there this season. Again, Rivers is leading the league in passing yards. He still has 30 touchdowns. It's really a career season for him in every aspect except for the record. And their turnover differential is terrible. Like even with, number one offense, number one defense, their turnover differential is something like -10 through 6.5 games at this point, including 4 turnovers in 11 minutes that we just saw in the first half here. Defensively, they are playing with short fields, granted, but also they are making stops when it matters. They're turning the ball over when it matters. After this Ninkovich fumble return, they sacked Brady on back-to-back plays to force that into a field goal instead of a touchdown, make it 13-0 or 13-3 instead of 17-3. And you see the defense kind of come up with plays like that over and over and over again. On both sides of the ball, this is an extremely talented team. And so I think that like minimizing it because of how truly awful the special teams was that season is almost a little bit of a disservice to the talent that they've accumulated on both sides of the ball. They just weren't able to do it consistently. And you see that in, we talked about earlier about like when the Chargers do win games, they're beating the piss out of teams.
Yeah.
They're smashing people's heads in. And, it's just they have these lapses in concentration, these lapses in discipline where, suddenly they have to dig themselves out of a hole. And for the most part, they're able to do it, or at least able to get close enough to doing it. And so, I really do think that it's an extraordinary season, Chargers wise and really league wise, that is really marred by the worst special teams unit in probably NFL history.
There will be some mishaps in the second half here. Patriots start with the ball, 3 and out, but wait, unnecessary roughness by Antonio Garay on third extends the drive. And Brady does snap that third down 0 for 6 streak on the next third, finding the team's leading receiver that day, Aaron Hernandez, to midfield. This drive takes over half the third quarter, 20-3 by the end. What was it like watching them fall behind 2-3 scores so often before roaring back?
Stressful. It was bad. It sucked. You know, the 2010 season is right around the turning point for me as a Chargers fan where I begin to go from, biting my nails and hinging my emotional state on the outcome of the game to almost a Zen state as
Uh,
the Chargers are playing, where it's like, you know what? No matter what happens, it can't be as insane as 2010 was. And so, you start to kind of like almost get Stockholm syndrome because you're just like, well, this is the team that I've chosen to root for. This is what I have to work with. I guess we're going to see if Philip can do it again. Um, and it's an exciting way to watch. Um, during the part where they're doing the roaring back, and it's a terrible way to watch during the part when they're doing the falling behind, and then it's an excruciating way to watch when they're doing the coming up just short part of it. And that's Chargers football.
yeah, we'll see them bring out the target line for the field goal kicker later. That's always a fun tradition for Chargers fans, I imagine, especially this season. But let's check out what's going on in Denver, where Josh McDaniels' Broncos are down 38-0 to the Raiders. Darren McFadden is going just nuts. It seems like teams have biases for signing or hiring people who have a really good game against them. This is maybe not that case. As a Chargers fan, they get Bisaccia on the Raiders before the Chargers lose that playing game to the Raiders, and then Oakland then dispatches Bisaccia to hire McDaniels. Broncos have been cycling coaches since 2010. Only John Fox has made it more than 2 seasons since then. Now KC is the class of the NFL, but even with all the chargering, do you have more confidence in the Chargers organization than you would for the Broncos or Raiders?
Generally speaking, I would say so. I think that there is a level of consistency for the Chargers that is comforting. I think week to week and game to game and quarter to quarter, it is probably a maybe not worse, but more difficult experience than maybe being a Broncos or a Raiders fan is. Um, Year over year, it's maybe not as like potentially exciting as the Broncos are. It's certainly more exciting than the Raiders are, given their lack of playoff capability. But it's probably less exciting than the Broncos ride is going to be for the next upcoming 14 years here from 2010 to present. The Broncos are making Super Bowls, and but there's also a lot of pretty low lows. Um, the Chargers, at the very least, like there are seasons where they are terrible, but you still have Phillip, you still have Gates. Those draft picks, when you do dip that far down, pan out for the most part. You get like a Joey Bosa, you get a Derwin James at 13th, a little bit later on. Like when you're picking that high, you tend to nail it from a Chargers perspective, and so there's always kind of like a return back to normalcy. Um, and even in the years where they're 6-10, 5-11, even 4-12, because it's still Chargers football, there is still something to work yourself up about during the season. And I don't think that's necessarily as true for at least the Raiders and the Broncos over that time period, where there's a lot of kind of lost years for them, where there's really no standout memories of anything happening. Um, and so, yeah, I think there's a general sense of more confidence. There's a general sense of like, well, we have Phillip Rivers. There, we can kind of always get something out of that. And then you transition pretty much directly from Phillip into Justin Herbert, and it's kind of the same sentiment. And so, there's always sort of the biggest question in football has always been answered for the Chargers from 2010 to now. And so that's always made it a little bit more comforting as a fan.
Folks, we got Undercover Boss tonight. But first, this could cut into 60 minutes because Rivers down 17 points with only half a quarter left in the game, has them just where he wants them. The Chargers have their quarterback just dealing at his peak. Timing and accuracy up the seam, just beyond the linebacker cooking. Big fourth down conversion to Patrick Creighton. Touchdown to Gates, followed by an onside kick converted into a Mike Tolbert touchdown. 23-20 Pats with the ball. Leading up to this 4th and 1, they just need to stop at midfield. 2-minute warning. Do you want the Pats in real time to punt or go for it like they'd been ridiculed for the previous year in Indianapolis?
I think that you're always a little bit afraid as a fan on the defensive side of the ball about the offense going for it in that situation, because it's a pretty clear, if they convert, the game is over sort of situation. And now, of course, we know, with the benefit of hindsight, and now with the new sort of like analytics showing us that like going for 4th down in that situation is generally the correct decision. You're always kind of rooting for the other team to make an incorrect choice. And so you're always kind of hoping that they choose to punt that ball away. Yes, they'll probably, pin the Chargers a little bit deeper. But if the coverage is bad, you have Darren Sproles returning punts, who's, an electric returner at this point. And even if you're backed up a little bit, you still have all 3 timeouts. And, there's still plenty of momentum there to get a drive going. At the same time, though, this defense has pretty successfully bottled up the Patriots thus far. Going back to the first half, they averaged, the Patriots are averaging 1.4 yards a play in the first half of this game. Start to put it together a little bit in the second half. But I think that you have some confidence. They've been getting penetration all day. And so even if they do go for it, I think that you have that game in Indianapolis last year, like you mentioned, to lean on, and you have, some confidence that like Barnes and Antoine Applewhite and Antonio Garay have been getting penetration into the backfield kind of all day.
Ron Rivera's unit getting it done. Antoine Barnes, as you mentioned, just smoked Matt Light at the end of the first half and in some key 3rd down situations. Matt Light, the guy who'd been blindside for Brady's entire career to that point. Chargers got 4 sacks on Brady in that game, and the run defense, as you mentioned there too, comes through. Antoine Applewhite sheds the tight end, gets BenJarvus Green-Ellis in the backfield. The clock is just under 2 minutes. Feeling good?
You're feeling decent. I think you're feeling maybe not as good as you could potentially feel, because on that 3rd down play right before this 4th and 1 conversion, Eric Weddle picks up the ball and runs it in for what looks like a fumble 6, and you think, wow, the Chargers have taken the lead. And it turns out Welker's out of bounds. At least he's short of the 1st down marker, and so it sets up that 4th and 1. But you're still kind of coming off that adrenaline rush of, oh wow, we finally got a fumble 6 that went our way.
Yeah.
But it's still, just outside 2 minutes, all 3 timeouts. You're at midfield. You really only need, you think, 10 or 15 yards to get into field goal position, and potentially tie it at least. They've been moving the ball even without their top 3 receivers. Gates' first catch doesn't come until the 3rd quarter when he catches that touchdown. And so like he hasn't even been super involved, and the Chargers have still been able to move the ball. And so, I think you're feeling decent. You're feeling like this might be the one where they finally break through and finish the comeback.
Weddle returning it, and as you mentioned, they go to Welker. Chargers secondary doing a good job. Patriots didn't merely just try to run it out. Brady was finding his guy Welker, and they got him short. Was he got Rivera, and then defensive backs coach Steve Wilkes the year before they went to Carolina, held Brady under 5 yards a pass that day.
Yep.
You must be looking for some vindication there too for 06, where like you play pretty good defense on Brady, and then you have Marlon McCree interception and fumble. But you guys stopped Brady. So does this feel like a chance for vindication here?
Definitely, yeah. I think like growing up, the Patriots were always my least favorite outside the division, because it always felt like the Chargers had Brady's number. They did everything that they needed to do to kind of contain him. and then they would still find a way to lose that game anyway. Versus like against the Peyton Manning Colts, for example, they had Peyton's number and would win the game.
Yeah.
And so I was never really like a huge Colts hater, even though they played the Chargers in the playoffs practically every season for this stretch. Because it was always, oh, well, Peyton is going to throw 3 interceptions to Antonio Cromartie again, and it's not going to matter.
Yeah.
But it always kind of felt like even if Brady does that, the Patriots are going to find some nonsense way to pull it out, and it's going to be insane, and I'm going to hate it. So you definitely are like, it's a regular season game. It's week 7, but at the same time, like it's kind of a must-win game. It feels like for the Chargers here at this point in the season with the way that things have started, and so it definitely feels like a chance to kind of get one over on them finally, and at least like prove that you can beat Brady even in a lower stakes context.
Nate Kading is out with injury, so they won't be relying on Kading here. They hope to not rely on Chris Brown either. I mean, they have well over a minute and a half left when Rivers hits Gates to get the Bolts immediately into what they say is Brown's range. But once he puts on a Chargers jersey, you just got to change the target line. It's not the 38, trust me. They get within the 35. Yeah, about 90 seconds left, 3 timeouts. 3 plays later, they're attempting a 50-yard field goal. Are you just blacking out at this point?
Definitely, yeah. I mean, there's a Patrick Creighton drop on first down that would have gotten them 5 or 6 yards to move them a little bit closer. That honestly probably potentially would have been enough for them to get a first down on that series, because then on they gain a few yards on second and third down, they get it in range. Initially, when they set up, it's a 45-yard field goal, and then they managed to get another pre-snap penalty, which we've kind of been foreshadowing the whole episode here of just the pre-snap mishaps and the lack of discipline and whatever. And so it ends up being a 50-yarder. You start thinking about like, oh well, like the whole reason that they're this far away in the first place is that Brown just kicked the ball out of bounds on the previous possession, which is how the Patriots got the ball on the 40 to begin with. And so, yes, you get the stop at midfield, but also like if you would just kick the kickoff normally, then you might have gotten that stop on the 27, and then they punt it away, and maybe you get a little bit closer that way. And so, it is full blackout time at this point. You're thinking, man, I really wish Nate Kading wasn't injured for this game. All pro kicker last year. Now we have to rely on this guy that we signed off the street earlier this week, who has just kicked the ball out of bounds on a kickoff. At least he's successfully converted an onside kick. And so there's a little bit of hope there, but it's full, like, looking through the gaps between my fingers at this point, can hardly watch.
It seemed like it almost got blocked too. Like on top of that,
Yeah.
off the post, Patriots escape. You're down to 2-5 after this 23-20 loss. I mean, maybe not over, but we're definitely behind the 8 ball at this point. Despite number 1 offense, number 1 defense, somehow Chiefs win the division and Chargers can't even score a wild card.
I mean, definitely behind the 8 ball at this point. I think like the fact that it's off the post as it kind of fades to the right is even more painful with the context of the pre-snap penalty, because that field goal is probably just barely good from 45.
Yeah.
And so that exact kick, right? You're like, oh, okay, we're going to overtime. Great. And so, like the schedule is not super tough for the rest of the season. But you're definitely behind the 8 ball. It's definitely one of those where, we're approaching Halloween at this point. This is when the Chargers are supposed to turn it back on. It still looks like they're kind of figuring things out. It's a 3-game losing streak at this point. And it's starting to feel like something about this team is just fundamentally wrong, despite the fact that it's number 1 offense, number 1 defense. I think at the end of the season, like for me at least, I don't even think that I necessarily registered until years later that it was the number 1 offense, number 1 defense team, and it was just like the special teams were that terrible. Obviously there are recollections of the special teams being awful. That Raiders punt block sequence has stuck in my mind. The Leon Washington game sticks in your mind. But there's a lot of like special teams miscues throughout like the rest of the season that you know, don't necessarily remember quite as much. Like Brown kicking it out of bounds in week 7 in this game, the McCluster punt return in week 1, you know, where like it kind of all adds up like that. And so I think in at the time, when the season ends and the Chargers are 9-7, they're just outside the wild card. I think you kind of look at it and you say, well, that kind of makes sense. They were kind of beat up all year. You know, it was a good, but didn't really necessarily feel like a great season from Rivers, even though it was in retrospect. And you know, so I think there's not a ton of surprise in the moment. I think that looking back at it and looking at it that way, it's obviously surprising and it's obviously insane. You know, to have a team that is, by all accounts, a juggernaut on offense and defense completely miss the playoffs because the special teams was that bad. Like, not even like bad enough that they had to be a wild card team, bad enough they didn't get a first round bye or anything, but bad enough that they missed the tournament entirely. It's something that I don't think we'll ever see replicated in the NFL again. And, you know, in a lot of ways, that's the epitome of 2000s, 2010s Chargers football.
This has been another episode of Remember That Game. Please rate, review, subscribe, and check out more episodes.